Yes, thank you for joining us on this very special audio event. My name is Manzoor Mohammed. I'm a co-founder of Capacitas. Here at Capacitas, we love to hear about people's cloud stories, whether that story is about where you're planning to move to the cloud, or you're in the middle of moving to the cloud, or you've been in the cloud for a few years. You've all got some great stories and experiences you can share that we can all learn from. I'm absolutely delighted to have Nick Satie. He's the Chief Product Officer and Chief Technology Officer of Blackhawk Network. Blackhawk Network is an international provider of platform services that support gift and prepaid card services. Have I got that right, Nick? I've summarized Blackhawk Network.
Close enough. Yeah.
Close enough. Close enough. Nick is incredibly experienced. He's had amazing roles in amazing companies in the past. He's been the Chief Technology Officer at PayPal and Amex, so he's got a real wealth of experience in this financial and tech sector. But on top of that, I've got to know Nick over the last couple of years, and what I really like about Nick is he's really thoughtful. And in our conversations we have had, he really understands the whys of system behavior and also organizational behavior and how they relate. And that's important because those behaviors, when you move to the cloud, become important when it comes to your performance, availability, and cost efficiency. So I'm sure you're going to find Nick's insights really, really interesting, and I'm hoping he'll provide you some tips that you can take away in your own environment. Feel free to ask any questions in the chat window. I'll do my best to get through as many of those questions and post them to Nick or share them with Nick. Just a bit of housekeeping. We've got about 45 minutes for the session. I'll try my best to be on time. The last session I did ended up being about 15 minutes over, so I'm hoping someone will tell me to wrap it up quickly. So that's enough about me. I'm going to introduce you to our very special guest, Nick. So Nick, if you want to introduce yourself and maybe give a bit of your background, and we can get started.
Thanks, Manzoor. I appreciate the very kind words and my background. I've spent a reasonable amount of time in technology now, and I've had a chance to see all sorts of different architectures and trends, and I think the as they say, the one true thing is in the space that we're in is change is happening. It's happening all around us, and I think that the pace of change is only speeding up. And so, I think we have to make sure that we embrace change and embrace trends, and make sure that we go into these technologies with our eyes wide open and make sure that we're addressing, just like you said, not just the technical things, but also the cultural things, the mindset that people have to go into it with, because there can be a lot of opportunities that you leave on the table if you don't take advantage of them correctly. So thank you for having me, and I really appreciate, by the way, all of your guidance and wisdom. I've been lucky to have been in some great companies at great times in their lives, and surrounded by really good people that I've learned from. So hopefully you can share probably not any earth-shattering insights today, but hopefully at least my perspective on how we've put some of these things together and why certain things work the way they do.
Yeah, I think that's really good. I think what is worth maybe even talking a bit more about is also the organizational aspects, because those are a lot tougher to deal with than the technical aspect. And sometimes the way people have worked in the past, it's just the way they're used to, and changing that can be quite difficult.
Exactly.
So maybe we could kind of talk about your previous experiences, I suppose, before life in the cloud. And we kind of explains why people behave the way they do now.
Yeah, no, exactly. And this is an audio stream, so you can't see all the gray hairs that I have. I could probably talk about this for a long time. Life before cloud, BC, a new definition of the term BC, right? Before cloud. But anyway, look, as I said before, I've been around, all the way back in, mainframe computing with remote terminals to client server to distributed. Introduction of virtualization, infrastructure as a service, platform as a service. I think that the main thing that sort of highlighted the early part of before cloud, we spent as a business a lot of time on infrastructure that was not accretive to the value that we were providing to our customers or our shareholders. And so, whether it was racking and stacking, worrying about redundancies and network and power diversity. And I remember, back in my days at level 3, thinking about how do we containerize? And this is a very different concept of containerization. This was like building an entire mini data center inside a shipping container that you could put on the back of a truck and take it and drop it onto any regen site this is the optical regen sites on level 3's network. Had been designed to be on-ramps and off-ramps for data onto the network as well. And how can we literally like drop that thing in the middle of nowhere and plug it in and get electricity and connectivity. And those are the only two plugs that you would need, right? A big Ethernet jack and a big plug. And now all of a sudden you had what was the start of the concept of cloud. But a lot of time was spent on that, and everybody had to be experts at it. And I think that this is where we got into some really interesting challenges. The other thing, if you think about the data center days, we'll talk about it in the incentive models, right? When you planned, you didn't plan around sort of technology pace of change. You planned around your financial model. So if you depreciated your hardware or amortized your hardware and your investments in infrastructure over 3 years, those are the time horizons that you planned in. If you did it over 5 years, those are the things. And before virtualization, when we had dedicated infrastructure for applications, you had to plan like 5 years ahead and decide you're going to go buy this box, and God forbid that you ran out of capacity sometime in those 5 years and you didn't have a scale out architecture and you had to go buy another bigger box to run this thing on. You got all sorts of demerits and people yelling at you for under planning. And I think just to exemplify that at PayPal, and I've talked about this publicly, but it was really interesting. We started planning for the holiday volumes. PayPal obviously was in the payment space and very driven by retail cycles. We started planning for holiday volume infrastructure, and PayPal was a scale-out architecture, right? There were a few components that were scale-up, but that needed to scale vertically. But we had to go buy additional hardware and start planning in May. So this was like a full 6 months before your holiday volumes hit. You were already starting to procure hardware. Provision it, configure it, rack it, stack it, cable, deploy software, get the imaging right. And we had, a decent amount of automation in terms of the software deployment, et cetera. But all this stuff just took time. And then you had to make sure it was all working correctly. And then you had 2 peak days on Black Friday and Cyber Monday. And then all of that capacity was just unused for many months. Now, the one saving grace at PayPal was that our business volumes were growing so fast that by April of the following year, we were already we were back at holiday volume. So there's very few businesses that are growing like that at 80-90% year over year. So it was one of those saving graces at PayPal, but most of us don't have that luxury, and so I would characterize the world before cloud in sort of three ways. One was the incentive models were first of all, you had to have experience and expertise in aspects that were not core to your business. You had to have you had a culture where longer term planning horizons were the norm and were what was rewarded. And I think the third is that the infrastructure utilization levels were way off of what there was a lot of wasted capacity. I would say in the pre-cloud world.
I think that the other thing, I don't know if this is true for PayPal, but I've certainly seen in other environments, is that in the data center world, there was a mindset: if it's working, don't bother looking at it.
Yeah.
You just let's just leave it in there. I remember actually when I first started out in the world, I remember one of the program directors I was working on the project, and he said, "Look, we're going to just have this box. We'll size it massively, and we'll never touch it again."
Yeah.
And that was literally it. And that was his model for delivering this particular project. So,
and look, I think unfortunately some of those behaviors haven't changed, right? I mean, it's the same people, especially in these lift and shift projects moving to the cloud. I think that's where you really need to go into this with your eyes wide open and know that you're going to have to do things differently. You can't just take the same model that you had before and hope that it works.
So maybe if we fast forward from to Blackhawk Network, I suppose the question is, why did Blackhawk Network want to move in the cloud? What's the kind of business reason? What did it mean for you guys technically?
Yeah, so the decision predated me. I've been at Blackhawk just a little over 4 years now, and so Blackhawk had already embraced the cloud for a lot of the new development that was happening, and then in the time prior to my arrival, there was also a strategic decision made, and for all the right reasons, right? People move to the cloud because it's going to be faster time to market, and because you would be able to take advantage of newer technologies, more quickly without having to build that expertise. And then what we talked about, which is just allowing us to focus on our business applications, on the things that drive revenue, as opposed to all the supporting infrastructure. And a belief that there would be a significant amount of efficiency from it. Some of the metrics that I've seen back in the early days of deciding to move to cloud is that for every dollar that companies spend in capitalizable hardware in the data center, they were spending $2 on everything else, and that was people, software, and so certainly a consumption-based model has its own challenges, and the fact that now we have to move things that were CapEx into OpEx. But the underlying benefit of speed, velocity, and allowing the experts to focus on the infrastructure that would allow you to innovate much faster were very true. But I think that the interesting aspect of cloud that maybe wasn't necessarily thought about as a driver is that the real value is really based on the nature of our business. So similar to PayPal, we are in what we call the branded payment space, gift card space. We very much follow retail cycles, and we have a very peaky business. In fact, I would argue that our business is even more geared towards procrastinators, and our highest volume days are the day before Christmas, while Cyber Monday and Black Friday.
That sounds like me.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess that's why I gravitated to this business as well, because I am a procrastinator. But so just looking at our volumes, Q4 is more than half of the volume for the year. December, so 1/3 of that Q4 is 3 times any other month in that quarter. Our peak day is 5 times any other day, and our peak hour is more than 10 times the volume. So you can just imagine that in the data center we are provisioning for that peak capacity, and for the rest of the year that capacity is not being utilized. And so with the cloud and the ability to scale up and down with volume, you can absolutely imagine the benefit that we would that we would get from being able to scale down our and up on demand, and hopefully automatically, and finding those micro patterns as well. Generally speaking, in our business, February and March tend to be the slowest times of the year. April then has some holidays like Easter, and then May has some holidays like Mother's Day, and then you have dads and grads in June. But then again, it slows down up, leading up into back to school, and then Christmas. So one of the things, just as an example, we did this year is that our volumes have grown, our infrastructure, our compute volumes, transaction volumes have grown, in the high teens over the last several years, and we've also been moving some big workloads to the cloud. We were able to scale down our footprint in February of this year, and our AWS bill was the lowest it's been in 3 years, despite the fact that we have almost 40% incremental volume that was moved, either applications were moved, or an acquisition that is now all included in that monthly cost as well. So huge opportunity to tap that we just didn't have the ability to do in the data center.
So you could argue that like 40%, before this point, you were actually 40% oversized, and that it could equate to like a significant chunk of
yeah, I mean, it's all relative. So I think we were just not taking advantage of. We weren't oversized for what was needed, but only at one point in the year, right? So and that kind of goes back to the cultural point that we've been talking about, right? Which people didn't get fired for oversizing infrastructure, right? I mean, just like you said in the example, it's like go buy a big box and set it and forget it and don't worry about it. The penalty of having an outage, which all of us were, I think everyone tries to avoid in every business, but it's particularly acute in payments, especially if those outages are caused with a higher volume, right? And so you tend to be a heck of a lot more conservative in the world that we live in, and I think that's where you have to make sure that you invest in the things that are important, like investing in scale out architectures or auto scale capabilities and refactoring applications if they can't take advantage of that, because those are the things that are going to help you use that infrastructure more efficiently.
So I've just had a question here. Probably a good point to raise this. How do you avoid over-architecting for 99.999, I assume that's 5 nines uptime, when your actual business SLA is 3 nines, 99.9? And how do you quantify what's good enough?
Yeah, look, I think at the end of the day, you really have to just show the pros and cons of each approach, right? So nobody really understands what 3 nines is relative to 5 nines, both in terms of cost and in terms of downtime, right? So 5 nines, I think, is like 4 seconds. I should go look it up on the. Or just ask AI and it'll tell you exactly what that is.
That's what everyone else is doing.
Infinitesimal. So while it sounds good to have 4 nines, do you really need it, or can you deal with whatever it is, a couple of minutes of downtime, in a month, and can you make sure that you have other mitigating capabilities like store and forward architecture that gives you some level of protection from business capabilities. So I think the most important thing that I've seen is just quantifying it, right? Because and being honest with yourself that architecting for 5 nines is very different than having the good fortune of being able to deliver 5 nines, because you can architect for 3 nines and deliver 5 nines. by luck. I mean, yeah, luck has a lot. If you don't have a network outage, you'll be fine. If you don't have an AWS problem with that affects more than one region, you'll be fine. But I think that really is the advice that I would give people is quantify the cost versus the actual downtime, and so the business and you collectively can make the decision on what your tolerance is for downtime, and then invest in the technology and the infrastructure that's going to allow you to quickly recover. Right? I mean, first of all, being able to detect and recover is the key to your uptime and availability. So yeah.
I've got another question. You mentioned on another article that you felt that CTOs should be part of security discussions. How has that influenced your outlook on Blackhawk's journey to the cloud?
I'm not sure exactly what Nigel is referring to, but I think at least in the CTO models that I am comfortable with and have operated in, is not just CTOs are part of security discussions, but CTOs own and are accountable for security just as much as everything else. And in the payment space, security is actually also tied to fraud and risk, because a lot of the business fraud is very much directly linked to compromises, security compromises, if you will, in the architecture of the product systems and applications, etc. So it's definitely had a huge influence on our journey to the cloud, and as it should for everyone. I think that is one of the things that even when we were in Amex, there was a perspective that because we were highly regulated, we couldn't operate in the cloud, and that was something that we wanted to challenge. But in the meanwhile, we said, okay, if we can't take our systems to the cloud, can we bring cloud technologies to our infrastructure? And so, looking at implementing infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, using a lot of the commercial and open source tools that we were able to bring to bear, to give us some of the same benefit, not all of the benefit, clearly nowhere close to it, but then get us to start thinking and designing and architecting our systems in a way that could be moved to the cloud, especially into capabilities like the virtual private cloud, etc. That gives you a good security perimeter, even though you are in shared infrastructure. So I'm not sure if that necessarily answers the question specifically, but hopefully, I don't think that the CTOs need to be part of the discussion. I think they need to own the discussion.
Okay. Just going back to your own experiences of going to cloud, and you talked about the benefits. Hey, we could compress our cost base, compress the capacity, and I guess there must have been challenges in getting people to work in that way, organization, or was it easy? It'd be kind of interesting to know how that kind of decision to compress occurred. Was it easy, or did it take convincing?
Well, I mean, I think change is always hard, right? Regardless of whether the change is to something that has a promised better future, people have different reactions to change, and so that was certainly the case at Blackhawk as well. I think the catalyst that made it a little bit easier or sped up that reaction was that we had a lot of success with teams that had built apps in the cloud over the last 10 years, from the start. So we had several of our core systems that were rewritten in I would say the 5 to 7 year time frame ago, and those systems were built for the cloud from the start, and so a lot of the benefits that those teams gained were known and visible across the organization. So I think we didn't necessarily have too much pushback. But I think, again, it comes down to how do you allocate your resources between things that are going to drive revenue versus things that are going to improve your future that have a little bit longer payoff. Although in some cases the bottom line payoff of these moves is pretty significant. So there was a little bit of sort of mandating that we had to do, and especially as we got to the tail end of the last few systems that were left in the data center. Those were clearly the ones that were the most difficult to move to the cloud, either because they weren't architected correctly or because, for example, with our network switch, we still needed to have network endpoints. When I say network, the credit card network endpoints in the data center, and we have been trying to get, along with a bunch of other payments companies, the cloud infrastructure providers, to work with Visa, MasterCard, Discover, Amex, to allow us to operate more effectively out of the cloud. But so those are clearly the things that are the heavier lift that have taken a little bit longer. But I don't think it was lack of motivation. I think it was just the opportunity cost of doing the work and how much work needed to be done. I think the benefits that we've seen are clear. I mean, we've absolutely seen the benefit to faster time to market. We've clearly seen the benefit to being able to scale up our infrastructure and scale it out as required. But I think the one thing I would say is that it takes work, right? So there was this fallacy that, oh, we didn't need anyone that knew infrastructure anymore, and that couldn't be further from the truth. You just need people that know a different kind of infrastructure. You might not need to know, how to go rack and stack servers and wire them, and build for redundancies, and implement firewalls and network switches and all the rest of this stuff. But you still need to have the fundamental understanding of how to define infrastructure as code. How do you make sure that your CI/CD pipeline and tooling takes that into consideration, abstracts it from the developers to help them be more productive, but gives them full transparency and control so that they're not treating infrastructure as a black box either. So there are definitely a lot of new skill sets that you have to bring to bear, and then I think the application developers and architects that work on applications also really need to understand how systems use infrastructure, because now you have so much more control over it. You can make even bigger things happen in terms of performance and capacity that otherwise you didn't really have very many incentives to drive in the data center.
Yeah, I just want to pick up a couple of points there, really important. I've seen this is a recurring theme that people set up, make it easier for developers to turn up services, and they put templates in place. But often those templates and the sizing of them, they're just like, okay, we're just going to put like 1 unit of capacity, and the developers just roll it out. But whether they use it or not, doesn't matter. I was just wondering, is that something you've seen, or something that, and if it is, how did you kind of address it?
Yeah, old habits die hard, right? I mean, I think unless you change the incentive model, the teams are still conservative in their estimation, and and you say, okay, this is how much I think I'm going to need, but then I'm going to add a buffer on top of that, and I'm going to plan for the peak hour of the peak day of the peak month, and so you end up over capacitizing, over provisioning infrastructure, and I think this is where we have to also change that incentive model, right? Make sure that teams understand that it's not just okay, but it is important for them to look at and test the boundaries of how far changing utilization impacts performance, right? And so we do tend to use cost as a shorthand, and I think you and I have spoken about this before, right? There's like,
That's right.
oh, there's a cost initiative. It really isn't a cost initiative. Cost is just a nice way to understand your utilization.
That's right.
And really, increasing utilization obviously lowers cost, but you have to look at how it impacts performance. And so, when we talked about this, if you can put those three things side by side and say, these are the areas where we've extracted the most amount of cost, and increase utilization to a reasonable amount without affecting performance, or one of the things that I've seen as a side effect from getting people to be curious and think about it, right? So how do you make sure that you're incentivizing them to go look at that data, and be obsessed with the data on maybe not everyone, but at least a few people on each team should be looking at how is my system using the infrastructure? Where are the bottlenecks? If I try to increase utilization and I see performance being impacted, I made a very small change here and my performance impact was huge. How do I kind of get that to be what people are curious about? And that's why I think incentivizing efficient use of infrastructure, and giving them permission. And sometimes it's just, knowing that they have permission to experiment and do it in a sensible way, right? So, of course, try to avoid experimenting in production. But in some cases, it's okay if you've got a scale out architecture, scale it down. And if you see something going wrong, if you've got good instrumentation, you can immediately scale it back up in seconds. So, give people that permission to say, I'm not going to fire you if we have an outage. Of course, if you're sloppy, that's a whole different thing. But if you've done your due diligence and you have a strong conviction, and you've done your homework in making sure that you're going to do, be careful about making that change, it's okay to have a hiccup along the way, right? So I think those are the things that because if you think about what actually happens in the cloud, if you don't change some of these old habits, now you have infrastructure that's abundant, not free, although sometimes the application teams don't see the cost.
It's not out of their budget.
To use new things, which is a big benefit, but it also requires teams to understand that there's a cost associated with it, and so bringing that into the equation, into the vernacular, into the metrics that teams are measured on. I think it really is the way that you sort of prevent that. That slide, right?
I think the other thing is that in a payments world where you're looking for high availability, high performance, if you're running your system at very low utilization, actually that means there might be something wrong. So there could be a time bomb sitting there. So actually, you should be more confident if it's running at 50, 60% utilized than if it's run at 5%, because
look, I don't want to make blanket statements and come across as too Pollyanna, but you're absolutely right. And that's a conversation that you and I had, is that if you've got servers that are running at 5% utilization, and you try and increase that to 10%, and your performance falls through the floor, it should be the clearest sign that you've got a bottleneck somewhere, right? And I think it's one of the holy grails that I hope that a lot of the AI tools today, that somebody builds a foundation model for application performance, not these large language models, because I think being able to see that correlation, and for the AI to be able to do micro testing, to be able to understand what those cause and effect relationships are, so that you can identify those bottlenecks and help address them. I think that's going to be a very, very important addition that AI can make to the world of cloud and distributed computing in general.
And I've got a question here. What's your experience? Well, we're talking about AI, so I thought I'd fill this in. What's been your experience at Blackhawk Network around AI use cases? Are you at that stage yet with production AI workloads? And what's your view on its consumption, and will it and how it'll grow with future adoption?
Yeah, look, I mean, I can. We've, you know, in some ways, when people generically refer to AI, it kind of makes me a little antsy, because we've been doing machine learning forever, right? I mean, it's
That's right.
and that is a form of AI, but those are domain specific models. At Blackhawk, we've had we operate in a sort of anonymous near cache product line that is gift cards and stored value. And so fraud and risk is super important to us, and we've invested over the years in risk models that we believe are at least for the gift card industry, the best in class risk models. And yeah, there is a cost implication to obviously training those models and doing the analytics to get there. The inferencing costs are not all that significant. I mean, I think that, at runtime, making a risk decision, it's just like any other compute transaction. So
it's just a transaction. It's probably yes
exactly,
or no.
Exactly. And so the really interesting scenarios are going to be if for companies that are in the business of building these foundation models. Obviously, there are massive implications to infrastructure costs, because and that's why I think NVIDIA's stock is where it is, and companies like OpenAI need to raise billions in funding to fund their infrastructure build out.
That's why he was over in Saudi Arabia, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And so I think it just depends on what you're going to use AI for. We do have production AI workloads, just like I said. We are talking about the use cases in risk. We also leverage AI within the workflows of some of the SaaS products that we use. So we are using AI to help our customer support agents service our customers more effectively. We are using AI, although a little bit more primitive form of AI, in our call center, IVR system, and moving to a truly natural language response system in the future. But those are all things that we're using as SaaS products. So hopefully the infrastructure costs are baked into the fees that we pay, and we're certainly paying enough in fees. So I'm sure that there is some cost included in there. And then as we look at building out our own capabilities on Gen AI types of technologies, or these large language model types of technologies, we're certainly keeping an eye on what that cost is. And I think again, for inferencing, it's generally within the realm of the business value that it's providing, and we will try to figure out how to recoup that cost in some way, shape, or form. If we're providing value to users, we can certainly charge for it as well. So I don't know. I know that's a little bit of an arm wavy answer, but certainly we are using AI, and we have production AI workloads today, both in our internal sort of productivity environment. More than 5% of our code, it was 5% the last time we looked at a code census, of checked in code, of pull requests are now generated by GitHub Copilot, which is what we've made available to every one of our engineers at Blackhawk. So that and we've seen a tremendous amount of productivity improvement from that.
It's interesting. I was just going back to talking about payments. over in the UK, there's regulatory requirements being introduced to basically make performance more aggressive. I suppose in that world where the perception is every millisecond counts, how can you avoid this situation where teams feel like, well, we need to throw everything at it to get those numbers? I'm coming to your point. How do you actually reward them in that highly regulated environment to take those risks?
Yeah, the one thing I want to, I'm not a regulator. I'm not a compliance person. So, but of course, over the last 20 years of being in payments, I've had to deal with them. I think regulators are generally reasonable people. They're trying the outcome that they're looking for is pretty straightforward. They want to make sure that what they consider to be critical systems for businesses, for consumers, are not aren't suffering from long outages. And catastrophic failures like natural disasters, etc. And I think they're getting more understanding and proficient on what it means to deliver that kind of capability in a cloud world. Whether that's the old rules that they had around you have to have a second fully sized region.
That's right.
Or whether it's on every millisecond counts and performance, etc. I also think that a lot of teams sort of use that as a crutch, right? It's like, no, we've got all this stuff. And I think the thing that you have to go back to the teams and incentivize is, it's almost a badge of honor if you can do more with less. And I think that ethos has gone away. I remember back when I was learning to code, like you were challenged with how much you could do with 64K of memory, right?
Yeah,
and it was like a badge of honor that said, man, I can get a tremendous amount of performance out of it. I could do a lot of things with very, very few resources. And that was also the case in large centralized shared compute infrastructure, where you didn't want your jobs to be, resource hogs, or they wouldn't get scheduled, appropriately. And it was also the case when Google first launched App Engine, where you were mandated, your tasks could not run more than 10 seconds. If your task ran more than 10 seconds, Google killed it and restarted it somewhere else. And then if it ran for more than 10 seconds, they killed it and restarted somewhere else, because they were trying to maximize availability and scalability. And that was one of the fundamental architectural decisions that they made. And so I think we need to bring that back. I think we need to bring back that incentive model that says, guys, there is an art to building systems that are performant. Don't treat resources like they're infinite. And I think that's where just throwing more hardware capacity at the problem is not the answer. In some cases, it is the answer. It's the only answer. But you really have to incentivize teams to think about, that really is a badge of honor. I remember in the early days at Google as well, where and I think it still exists to a large extent. It's like, what can I do with as small a team as I possibly can? So it's a different kind of resource, efficiency. It's like people were really proud that said, hey, I managed this entire system with a team of 5 people or 10 people, and they weren't worried about building empires. So it's the same thing here. Is like, get people to be proud about how much they can do with as little resource, whether it's people or compute or memory, or and really focus on those things that are important. And the technologies that are out there now are just making it so much easier to do that. We just have to, as leaders, I think, give them the permission to go do it, and give them the space to go do it.
But I think that is exactly it. It's as you said, as leaders, you've got to give them the permission and the space to do it, and make it a sense of pride. And from that, actually for them personally, they're upskilling, they're making the jobs more interesting. So there's a lot of benefits of doing that as well. I'm conscious of time, and I'm this time I'm determined not to go overrun massively like I did last time. So maybe we kind of start wrapping it up. If for our audience, is there like some key takeaways that the audience can take away if they're either thinking of moving to the cloud, or in the middle of moving to the cloud, or now are in the cloud? Is there any kind of key takeaways you would suggest that they take on board that they could use after this event?
I can try to quickly summarize my thoughts, and I don't think any of this is groundbreaking, but I think it's very clear that you will get benefits from moving to the cloud. How much benefit you get from moving to the cloud is entirely dependent on how you rethink the relationship between the applications and the infrastructure that they use, and how much you rethink, right? So lift and shift will get you some benefits, but will not get you the true benefits that I think you need in the cloud. I think we, as we've talked at length in this conversation, the culture that you need to create is a little bit different than you have in the past. I think you need to celebrate curiosity. You need to celebrate and reward teams that are obsessed with the data and are continuously asking the why questions. Why are things working the way they are? Why are they not scaling up the way they are? And in parallel, you need to change your reward structure to balance risk and value, right? Rewards cannot only be about avoiding risks as they were in the past. You need to balance that, the reward structure for people that are willing to take calculated risks to deliver outsized value. And then the third is, I think, embrace the technology, I would say, and invest in it. So, invest in building out a CI/CD pipeline. If you can't do it yourself, there are plenty of products out there that help you, platform as a service, and there are things that come default with your cloud account, and there are other vendors that have capabilities out there, including moving to infrastructure as code, so that you can very quickly put more control and more transparency, visibility into what's going on with the infrastructure in the hands of your developers, and then also make sure that they can, spin up and down environments so they can experiment and test quickly, etc. And I think part of the investment in technology is definitely a big bet on AI. In my mind, this is not an if it's going to be valuable, it's how quickly it's going to be valuable, right?
That's right.
And I think, we are seeing a lot of real benefit to using AI to give people more confidence and permission to refactor code, go and address those bottlenecks. And then also, as we talked about, some investments where there are companies that are investing in foundation models that and it's both the APM vendors as well as new startups that are looking at how do we identify not just the cost savings opportunities based on utilization, but that connection between utilization and performance, and where those performance bottlenecks might be, that you can really start to hone in on. So look, rethink the relationship between application, invest in rethinking it. The cultural changes, rewards systems, and then the investments in technology would be the three sort of key takeaways that certainly I've learned from people like you. So thank you.
So Nick, that was a brilliant session. Thank you for making the time and sharing your wisdom over the from many years and many great companies. That's much appreciated. Thank you to the audience for attending. I hope you find it useful. If there's questions that maybe you didn't want to ask in the live chat, feel free to share those questions to me directly, and I'll see if I can answer them. And maybe if some of them for Nick, if you don't mind, I might just send them across to you and see how you would answer them. But yeah, thank you very much for attending, and I hope to see you at the next event, which will be in, I believe, June 5th with Andre on GenAI. All right, see you then.
Thanks, Mansoor.